Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Playwrights Center's Artists in Conversation. My name is Nicole A. Watson, and I'm the producing artistic director here at Playwrights Center. And we're so excited that you could join us tonight for this conversation. We love supporting artists and talking about artists and their process and their inspiration, and tonight is no exception. Tonight's conversation is about creating play cycles. And I am joined by three amazing artists who are joining momentarily. The power of Zoom is like you're not there and then you're there. Before we get started and before I do introductions, I do want to say that I would be remiss if I did not mention that we are having this conversation 2 days after August Wilson's birthday. And as many of you know, August Wilson authored the American Century Cycle, 10 plays that captured the Black experience in Pittsburgh throughout the 20th century. He's by no means the only playwright whose body of work exists as a cycle. As long as playwrights have been writing, they have been writing in cycles and trilogies and series. And I am so excited for tonight's conversation. I am joined by three incredible artists, three just exceptional and incredible artists who I'm sort of fangirling right now. Andrew Lee Creech, Defoe, and Mfoniso Udofia. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Otherwise, I would spend the rest of the time today talking about them rather than letting them talk to you about their work. So, my friends, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, name, pronouns. So, again, I'm Nicole A. Watson. I use she, her pronouns. And a brief introduction about the play cycle you are creating. And we'll start there. I have a bunch of other questions about the process, but again, if you can introduce yourself and tell us about the body of work that you are creating, I'd love to kick it off that way. Ty, would you mind starting?
Yeah. Hey everyone. Happy to be here today. Tai Defoe Indigenous cause. Waswaganin and Dunjaba Magizin and Dodem. And my pronouns are he, him, we, or just Tai. And my clans are Eagle Clan, and I'm also a Turtle Clan. And yes, I'm honored to be in this sort of conversation about trilogies. I am zooming in here live from lands of the Hopi, Pueblo, and Zuni people in New Mexico here. And I am in process of writing a trilogy called the Trans World Trilogy that amplifies the voices of queer voices that spans over decades and decades of times of individuals, of descendants of folks, and it takes place in past, present, and future. And I guess, through this conversation, I'll weave a little bit more about what it's about because I am in process of it. I have the first Trans World one, which starts in the reality of real life today, then spans off into other various speculative forms as queer literature does. And so that's something I wanted to talk a little bit this evening about. So I'll pause there for brevity. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, how about you?
What's up, y'all? My name is Andrew Lee Creech, he, him pronouns. I am currently based in Seattle, Washington, on the lands of the Coast Salish people. My cycle is called the Legacy Plays Project. When it's all said and done, it's going to be 9 plays spanning 3 centuries of history, with the goal of sort of reconciling one history. And what I mean by that is we tend to kind of put this separation between American history and Black history, but the reality is Black history is American history. So this particular cycle aims to sort of break that barrier down a little bit. It aims to use specific moments in American history as sort of these, American cultural touchstones to look at through a Black lens. So it's just literally just creating more Black narratives. I just want to see Black folks on stage in lead roles telling our stories, and then using these moments in American history to examine that and to do that. So sort of the overview of that project that I'm working on.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And Mfoniso.
Hello, hello. Mfoniso here. The She series, She, Her, Hers. I am zooming in today for the first time in a while from my home in New York City, which is amazing. And a little bit about my cycle. I am in the middle of writing 9 plays. It is, I did put the finishing on one play that could slide in and round that number to 10, but I have to come to my peace and my Jesus about that. Um, and I am really interested in writing Nigerian immigrants. I specifically, the question of the cycle is how can there be diasporic healing? So healing between people who identify continentally with Africa and all the diasporas. And what does that look like without placing whiteness in the center? And I give myself 9 plays in 100 years to try to tackle it.
Thank you all so much. Oh, this is going to be a very exciting night. Thank you. Thank you. My first question, part of me is like, do I ask multiple questions or do I ask you all the questions now and see where it goes? But I'll start with the first question. And I guess I'd love to know, when did you realize that your goal or your desire was to write a cycle? Was it you started writing a play and said, well, here's another play? Did you know when you set out? I mean, you're all brilliant writers and multi-hyphenate artists in so many ways. And so when did you discover that the thing you were doing or creating was in fact this trilogy or this cycle? Let's start there.
I'll go. I did not know until I was knee deep into the first play. The first play I thought was going to be just one. And it didn't go very well. I didn't love it. It just actually had its world premiere 16 years after my writing it. The Grove just opened world premiere in Boston. But when I first wrote that play, it wasn't very, very good. And so I started imagining and expanding the world because that particular play, out of all of the plays, is the one that has more echo tones of me inside of it. And sometimes writing oneself is not easy and sight isn't great. And so it's not until I started imagining and expanding and I went from one play to 3 plays. I thought I was going to be in a trilogy or a triptych. Then I swelled to 5. Then it went to 9. And I said that in the press so that I could hold my feet to the fire. And even now I'm telling you something slippery happened and there might be another. So yeah, that's how it happened for me. It manifested over time.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And your time. Yeah.
Yeah, I can go. I think I knew pretty much immediately. I was, sitting with a mentor of mine, and we were just sort of going back and forth about, the work we wanted to create. And I think this question came up for me about, well, whose stories haven't been told? Who hasn't had an opportunity to tell their story? And so from there, it just sort of launched that because I started thinking about, okay, well, you think about like the American frontier, the what we think of as the Wild West, and it can be this very like whitewashed sort of time period. So it's like, okay, but we know we were there too. So what were we doing in this particular time period? What were we doing in this particular time period? So I think sort of right off the bat, I was like, I knew that there were multiple time periods I wanted to tackle. And then it just came to 9 because I like things to be ordered. So I knew I wanted to do, if I could do 3 in the 1800s, 3 in the 1900s, 3 in the 2000s, that feels, that feels ordered to me. So I just picked 9, and I'm trying to also hold myself to that.
Great. And Ty.
Oh, wow. You all, I'm like, surely this is not a 9 cycle play I'm writing, so I'm in the middle of writing a trilogy of 3. So, right now, and, I really wanted to, about the play, there are common themes from the characters. And, in terms of transness and trans identity, there are like larger themes I wanted to explore in a workshop for one play that I was working on. And some things I wanted to explore were like liberation for trans individuals for the future in in the amount of statehood of violence right now in this political atmosphere, just a lot going on politically with that. So in the middle of a workshop, wanting to write about roots of resistance and breaking boundaries in a new dawn, I was trying to complete the end of the play. You're in workshop, you're trying to get the end, and you're like, dang, everyone's like, no, that's not it. And you come in the next day with new pages, like, nah, that's not it. And it was like, Ty, just like literally, what do you want to say? Focus on liberation, etc. Through two of my collaborators, when I was working on this play last August with Santi Iacinti and Heather Holinsky at Playpen, in that workshop with a group of trans actors, we were like, well, maybe this ending is becoming too linear. It's too using the oppressive structures that you want to push up against in terms of this like colonial way. So why not try a trilogy? Is this a trilogy? And I, thought, oh my God, this plot, all of this, of course it's a trilogy. Of course these trans identified multi-hyphenate intersectional identities couldn't solve essentially, right, these large questions they were asking in the play. And so right then I had an oh no moment of both sweat, fear, and also excitement at the end of that workshop, hearing it aloud and getting responses from the audience hearing it about wanting to know more about what happens to the futures of these individuals. So that's how I sort of knew at the end of the play. There's an elder that speaks and talks about, future generations to come, dreaming 7 generations ahead in Anishinaabe philosophy. That's thinking about, well, what about this future? And so, there were parts that were in other plays I was writing, and I told the dramaturge at the moment, I have this, cisdroid play, and I pulled out all these old things I was writing, and they all seem to relate to each other. And sure enough, it turns out I was writing a trilogy. So just I'll end there, but that's one thing I wanted to share.
Oh, this is great. I love hearing about like where the idea came from, and for all of you, like comes out of one, like a big question or a prompt that you want to focus on and write about. And then also I love Mfoniso that you were like, I wrote this play 16 years ago and I didn't think it was that great. And that became the ground on which these other plays sort of came into the world. And Ty, hearing you be like, I couldn't find the end. What was it going to be? And sort of realizing that as a writer, you can sort of make and have all the time and space in the world in some way for imagining. And Andrew, the way you talked about, like, if I can sort of tackle these touchstones and sort of say, we were here, I was here, what does that look like? So I think now I'll just sort of move into sort of my big question around sort of like process, sort of in terms of writing these plays, have you focused your energies sort of on and again, understanding that everyone here is at different stages of where they are in this, right? Is it one play at a time? Vanessa, to say that like the play you wrote 16 years ago just opened and closed, was there rewrites, was there rediscoveries? Andrew, I know you just did a workshop last week on one of your plays, and Ty, I got to read your first play in the trilogy, and sort of like I saw things that I've read about in some of your other work and things you're interested in. So after all of that, blah, 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 my question is sort of, how do you shape and think about the singular play in relationship to the world building that you're doing? Is it family trees? Is it lots of research, right? The worlds are both past, present, and really, as you said, time moving into the future. So I guess, how are you doing it? What is it like? What's the endeavor? And I'll just stop there. What's the journey like of making these worlds, or yeah, a whole universe?
For me, it's maddening. And it's a really good problem to solve, and an exciting challenge, exciting I think one of the first approaches I took was sort of figuring out what each trilogy of plays was going to be about ultimately, like what I wanted to do with each of them. And so I think once had sort of a loose structure on what I wanted to do, then I could see how they could link together. And then it became about finding the moments in history that could support each of those fully. So for the plays in the 19th century, I knew that I wanted to um, have all of those plays be set post American slavery, and wanted to have it focus on what does it mean to get freedom. So it's like you have freedom. How do you define it? What do you do with it? So all three of those plays in the 19th century focus on that question in some form, and choose moments in history to really examine that question. And then when we move into the 20th century, I think the question for me becomes, okay, you have freedom now. Now, who are you? So it moves from like, what is freedom? How do you define it? Into a question of identity. And so now those three plays will then all be dealing with um, identity in all its different shapes and forms. And now the third trilogy, I'm still figuring out. There's something there about reclamation. There's something there about hope. But I'm kind of just letting the third trilogy marinate and continue to evolve because we're still currently living in the 21st century. So I mean, everything is changing daily. And then as I'm constructing the whole cycle, I'm constantly doing all this research. And so something pops up on my radar, a piece of history that I never knew about. And I was like, oh, okay, that has to go in. Oh, wait, no, that has to go. Oh, we got to talk about that. Oh, no, I'll save that for my HBO miniseries. And you know what I mean? So it's just, it becomes this wild sort of puzzle to try to figure out. And then also just for each trilogy, for each individual play, and then when it's all said and done, how they can each kind of flow and be in conversation with each other while still being their own self-contained stories.
I'm just going to ask a follow-up question to you that hopefully Ty and Mfoniso will also respond to in this, like, how are you doing it? Are you, for your plays, Andrew, are there characters that that reappear over time? Or is it each play is like a place and a group of people and a time and the question, or is there any one or anything we're sort of following through all of those? And I add that to my question for everybody.
Yeah, so far, no. So far, each story is self-contained, and you don't see characters reappear. I've considered it, and it might happen. Who knows? But as it stands right now, because I think I've got four of the plays in process right now, four or five. So as it is right now, no. But who knows?
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. My other two friends who wants to, yes, Mfoniso.
So I am writing a cycle that spans from 1978 to 2078. So I am covering 100 years and I am pushing also into the future. I am specifically looking at how a family will build in America. So I am looking at one particular lineage as helmed by the heartbeat, the person, the matriarch of the cycle is Abasiama Ufot, and she's the one who will appear in most of the cycle plays. And then after that, you will see Disciple Ufot, maybe the next most. Then after that, their eldest daughter and the tributaries as the family expands and starts incorporating more and more people. And each play I discovered about my writing and who I am is propelled by a single question with a different protagonist.
Mm.
So, for example, the origin story, you are going to get to know, Abasiama Ufot as she first enters into this country through Houston, Texas. And that play is sort of built episodically, where we are losing time between scenes, and it's going to be on us as the viewer to catch up and run ahead. And most of the time when you're writing theatrically, they tell you don't show some, don't not show, I should say it this way, show the important things on stage. And sometimes Sojourners doesn't do that. And that was an important stylistic thing for me, especially when you're coming into this country and orienting. And so things are kind of scattershot. And you don't know, was that an important thing that happened? Was that not? How is this all flowing together? So I said it like that because each story has a different protagonist at a different phase in their life and a different conditionality, which means each of the plays are very different in their construction. So you'll have one play that's episodic. You've got a Her Portmanteau, where you've got a kid who wants a perfect life and is needing some answers, and that is maybe the closest thing to a well-made play that's inside the cycle. You've got another one that is an opera. I'm ending the cycle on a folk opera where we're gonna end in something huge and glorious as Adiaga, the eldest daughter, figures out how to love, and that was the gift that her folks gave her, her immigrant folks gave her the gift of imagination, imagining out of nothing. And that's kind of propelled by a love of Edwidge Danticat that I have, Create Dangerously. And then you've got other ones, you've got a children's play in there. You've got you have more experimental pieces. You've got things that are built on spirals. I am following whoever the protagonist is, and that's going to determine my structure. And part of your question too, Nicole, was like, how do you do it? Um, hilarious. And so,
Yeah, it's a five-word question that probably is quite.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I'm heading towards the end of this process. I've been at it the greater part of 16 years now, and I just finished the first act of the last play in the cycle. So I am looking at the end, I'm at the end of the tunnel on this. And I can like look back and tell you that I was pretty meticulous in my organization. I'm a rigorous researcher, even though I don't always love it if the research ends up expositionally in my work. I like it, the research more as condition. Um, and I allow myself to grow. So Boston is doing all of these cycle plays right now over the span of 2 years, which is incredible and chaos on my mind sometimes because I have to write and produce at the same time. Oh God, what was I gonna say? Even though I wrote Sojourners sometime in 2014, I think, which is the origin story, I was still editing it up until last year when it was going up in Boston, because there's nothing like for me, because I'm writing in continuity and I'm following people, being able to, as I'm writing forward, go and edit backward.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Wow. And sorry, are you writing in sequential order?
I am not writing in sequential order, and it was pretty important that I stopped writing in sequential order. I needed to understand the ending and I needed to have my tent poles. So
Mhm.
I wrote that the thing that I tell people is that there's the individual stories that I'm writing, and then there's the story of the cycle. And that those are two different puzzles that I'm figuring out. And so it was beneficial for me to write the tent poles, the beginning, the pivot in the middle of the cycle, and then the end of the cycle, and then go in and do a lot of the work that way.
Mhm. Hi.
Ooh, I love that. I love that because what I'm finding out is that very thing about, in this trilogy of plays across bloodlines and time, these folks do appear in all of the trilogies. Because the larger theme of it is, right, essentially fighting white settler colonial resistance. So the process inherently is a fluid, non binary process that I'm finding out, right, in terms of what that is. I kind of liken it, my family, they're like, well, what does that mean anyway? Non-writers, non-theater artists. And it's, I'm like, well, kind of, it's like rocks in a river, right? The rocks are there in this river and the water's like running around it. And yet there are rocks there that I can hop from one rock to the next, etc., gathering research and collecting these gems of wisdom from folks like Vine Deloria Jr., right, who's been writing about, you know, um, geology for their entire lifespan, right? Getting to go to the library to see some of the work that they didn't get to finish, where I get to pick up and instill that in some of the characters, right? So, what I'm enjoying in this process and finding the story, right? And allowing the story to speak through these characters and what's present right now is essentially that is indigenous storytelling techniques with like various queer themes that sort of brings about the interconnectedness of all beings and also creating a nonlinear passages of time, sort of these portals that are existing into the future. And I'm thinking about that a lot, and I'm also thinking about counter narratives in the piece too, right? About this story is happening, but you know just thinking about a lot of the characters fighting against misrepresentation, being silenced, erasure from colonial narratives, all of that. What does it mean to provide space of these histories and many different perspectives, right? I have to understand all of that in some ways, right? And have my own constitution as an individual. And then these characters also have to create their own constitution about what trans identity in 30 years from now looks like from an indigenous kind of lens, right? So thinking about active agents of change and survival and resistance. So, I'm kind of speaking about larger themes about it because I'm still like in the story, and every week I find something really important, like, oh, right, how could I, have forgot? I need to have think about ceremonial elements or sacred spaces or, awareness with the multiplicity of characters that I'm getting to know from, intersectional identities and backgrounds and identities that haven't even been thought of before, right? This idea about manifesting and architecturing a world unknown. That's a lot of speculative fiction work that I'm, diving and digging into. So, my playwright friend Josh Wilder, who many of you may have we sat down once and they said, "Ty, well, you can't microwave a play," and I thought that was so interesting because in Anishinaabe language, the equivalent word for microwave brain is computer, right? Is to sit down at your computer, type it out, and but the thing comes out, and that does happen, but it's a slow relational process, right? Of finding these gems of drama within things that I'm still unlearning myself, right? As a contemporary simulated person, where I'm really trying to dig really deep and center queer, trans, indigenous liberation for the future. So rather than leaning into the I, I'm really like leaning into the we in terms of a process and what that might mean for this. Yeah, so the other thing I want to share too is you know, that personal evolution within the piece itself in each play, and then also the societal evolution, right? It's writing a play where, under this the executive orders where, right, political ideologies don't even allow me to show up at cultural institutions, literally in rooms, to write the trilogy I want to write, right? So that also takes time to figure out who's going to offer me assistance to sit in a room to write about gender ideology at this time in 2025, right? So just kind of thinking about what does it take to do it? It takes, right, the help and kindness of folks who are supporting writers at this time, to provide these safe spaces of resistance to dream and imagine futures. So just kind of thinking a little bit about what my process has been on this particular piece, who that wants to examine ultimately, trans liberation for the future and evolving journey of families of trans individuals, like entire nations of trans individuals.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Nicole, I have lied to you. I just realized that there is a character that does appear in all in that will appear in all nine plays, and that is the Statue of Liberty.
Okay.
This is an American play cycle, so one of the things that I'm trying to do is examine, just use the imagery of this American symbol and examine what it might mean to people at each particular moment in the history of this cycle. So somewhere at some point in every play, the Statue of Liberty is like makes an appearance or is discussed at some point.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you all for talking about your process and what's been on your mind, right? None of these things are complete. And I sort of love, Vanessa, that you were like, I'm heading towards the end of this. And Ty, you're like, I'm at the beginning and I have all these questions, and you are making work in real time. Every day we wake up to this version of the country that we are in, and what does that mean for our work? And I think what I'm wondering about, I think this is probably a two-part question, um, is sort of as you are writing, right? Because the act of creating the plays is there's the blank page or note card or wherever you're writing or tablet, I don't know. Um, and then the play is being created. And so how do you know, I guess, when to keep things? Do you come up with something and as you're editing, you're like, I'll just put that in the other play? Like what is sort of editing and maybe discipline and or strategies around shape? And Mfoniso, you talked a bit about your process, right? Where you're like, I'm following the protagonist, and the protagonist will sort of dictate form and content and style in this. But I'm just wondering, for all of you, like when you're writing and, do you say, oh, that'll be the next play? Or, how is shape coming into being for all of you? And my follow-up question is sort of like, what are the creative challenges and opportunities in committing to writing a trilogy or a cycle of plays?
I'll go. Yeah, so I personally can be pretty vicious on whose play it is.
Mm.
And don't always, allow for an entire other story to totally erupt. What I love to do is add in the viewpoint, which is a wonderful thing when you've got people over points in time. So take a play like Run Boy Run. It's always going to be the patriarch's play. I'm not going to splay off. However, Abasiama is going to have grown in her understanding of her husband as the matriarch from Sojourners to Run Boy Run. And if you're following her language over a span of time, you're going to see, oh, something happened between those 2 or 3 years. I might not have touched it, but you will feel that ripple effect. Um, so how do I know when there was a time again in Run Boy, no, sorry, in Sojourners. Was it Sojourners? Yes, it was Sojourners, where there was something of disciple story that wanted to erupt within my matriarch story. And I just wrote it down and went, this is lovely. This is not the place. And it happened in Run Boy Run. And that was absolutely okay. It was wonderful because it was a different tone, it was a different rate of speed, it was a different feel. And for me, that's one of the wonderful things about getting to write in cycle is I can go as slowly or as fast as I want.
Mm.
And I do not have to break the frame of a play if I don't actually want to. I can hold and then move that where it's going to feel its most potent. And so, yeah, and I will say that I have loved writing inside of cycle because we talk about like growth, but I'm also interested in regression. where you've got a character who looks front-footed one day and she had a bad 1999 and is not well today. And you can look at what is growth or and backslide. And I go, a lot of times for African immigrants, for people of the Black diaspora, we don't get long span growth. And so not in play form, not a lot, not continuous. And that has been one of the greatest joys is that. So I hope that answers that question. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Harry Andrew. Who will go?
I can, yeah, when do you know? I don't even know how to talk about this, but all I know is when I was writing Last Drive to Dodge, that there's a character, my sort of main protagonist, Ro, has this connection with her mother. I know, like, as I was writing the play, her mother kept coming up. And at a certain point, it just felt right because she kept referencing her mother. There's something about it that just felt like, okay, well, I, we need to see her mother. And so there was a draft of the play where her mother appeared as a ghost. And there was something throughout the cycle that on my own personal journey, Andrew, the writer and the human being, over the last, I don't know, several years, I've really been part of my spiritual journey is connecting with my ancestors, right? And so that's something that's really important to me. So that's something I'm looking to bring into my cycle as much as I can. So with Dodge, there was just this moment where I was like, oh, she needs to see her mother. Her mother needs to appear. And so her mother appeared as this ghost. But I think throughout the development process, we were kind of like, okay, so she appears like halfway through, which is like kind of throwing people, and she like shows up for this one specific moment, but it doesn't really feel like it's carried all the way through or very like considered in a way that feels effective and connected throughout the whole piece. So ultimately, like that character of the physical like body of the mother went away, and it became the wind. So then all of a sudden, like Ro has this connection to the wind, and then that really kind of zeroed in on like what am I trying to get out of including Ro's mother? Okay, well, there's something about listening to your intuition and your gut. And so I'm like, okay, cool. How do I bring that into the play without another actor? Like, and so it became the wind. Then when we get to this new play that I'm working on, The Quilted Heart, the idea of ghosts and connection to ancestors came back up, and it felt more right this time because it's a story that is linking generations of women in the same family going back like 160 years. So then it felt like I could see it in a way that feels carried through, feels connected, and feels like really important to have this like these images and these people on stage, and then ultimately like all come together in the final image of the play, which I think is like really beautiful. But I got there by like having to sort of recontextualize the idea from a different play.
I love that. Yeah.
Ooh. Wow. Okay. I love this talk about organizing because I'm just like, yeah, indigenize everything all at once or decolonize everything all at once, right? And so for me, it's a lot of, hyper organizing in ways, kind of like, do you ever play those video Tetris games and you're just like, boop, 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 this shape fits here, this fits there, this goes there. So I've been really thinking about that a lot, about just like gathering the information in baskets and sort of disseminating the information on themes as it stands. And I've been thinking a lot about queer sovereignty or like indigiqueer sovereignty, right? And I really love what you said about, like taking the time that I need to really think about, right? If my peoples, my ancestors, right, had were really thinking about, right, in real time land culture and redefining gender and sexuality, then why can't I apply some of these same methodologies about, right, like saving the water, doing these things over a play that I'm writing? It's a play, right? And getting into this world. And so I kind of, having self sovereignty and taking the time that it takes to really understand some of these large subject matters, right, that have been on purpose invisibilized by the greater global culture. I need to take that same time and do my due diligence into organizing some of these thoughts and themes to fully integrate that so that I'm kind of seeing it like a time capsule, right? When I think about 150 years from now, if, a young queer indigenous individual finds these plays and they get to read them and study them or, see productions of them, like how incredible is that around the concept of we are still here, right? That we have not gone away, etc. So those are just like some things I'm thinking about as I'm beginning to write, right? This like growing trilogy, taking the same time that love or desire or kinship takes to steward. So those are just some things that I'm finding myself doing at this time.
I'm so excited just listening to the three of you talk about how you're making work at this time, looking at transness and indigenous relations and liberation, and this question of how can there be diasporic healing. Mfoniso looking at this family over 100 years and the Nigerian immigrant experience, and Andrew, the Black American experience. Just like my mind is blown. I want the budget to do the festival of all the plays. And aside from fangirling, my sort of question is, you all started with, these are the big questions that sort of demanded or required me to write these plays. How can there be diasporic healing, liberation for the future, sovereignty, identity, saying we are here, we are still here. In your journey, I won't ask you what is the answer, but in your journey, what have you discovered in your writing this? Ways to think about these questions that you've asked yourself or asking the plays to ask all of us. Um, what have been some of your discoveries in your journey of this, even though you have known so much to do this? Where have you landed with some of these questions, or how are you thinking about them anew or in this moment? And then in a moment, we'll start taking some questions from the chat. But yeah, I don't want to be like, what is freedom? Did you answer it? But I won't be so bold. But how are you thinking about these things?
I'll go again. I will say that for me, it's never the answer to the question, it's the journey for me. So I actually I'm pretty clear with myself that I'm putting out a question, and I am affording all the vantage points and hopefully providing enough mirrors that a question that is extraordinarily salient to me becomes a question in somebody else's mind as well. Because sometimes, the question about if I'm going to look at individual plays, like Sojourners, can a Nigerian dream operate within America? I don't think people are even thinking about that question. And that is the question that propels the entire, like, my people that have come here after decolonization. I think maybe now we are thinking about how does trauma become tradition. But we're also a nation state that doesn't have a lot of war on the ground. And that is a huge question of Run Boy Run. And I'm hoping that people will interrogate that question while within, as opposed to a spectator sport, which makes it easy to divorce and go home. So I do I have some answers to these questions that I have? Yeah, I do. She gets strong-willed enough to go, yeah, I do. But the exercise and the refining of how I got to that, I think, was the thing that I am most interested in. And when it comes to the question of the cycle, can there be, diasporic healing without whiteness in the center, which is a big one for me because a lot of the time what I see a lot are plays in which we are reckoning inside of the binary and reckoning and trying to find healing from a place that caused the first damage. And my day-to-day life as Mfoniso Udofia, not even a playwright, has so much joy inside of it. And so the answer is yes. And so I'm just putting that out there more forcefully so that we can deal with it. So I will answer the big one going, yes, I think that there can be, or else I wouldn't have taken on the cycle in that way. And for most everything, it's the journey to how you get there.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit too, because that really hit for me what you just had mentioned about journey. And I think like there is something to that because, when I think about liberation and joy and freedom, I'm like, okay, right? It's like the play, and for me, it's kind of thinking about what can this play do? Who can it affect and impact? And thinking about reevaluating and interpreting. And I don't have the answers for all of that. My hope is that, right, it's a community building as a civic engagement piece that a director, a theater, who's ready to truly do the work of going beyond land acknowledgement and decolonizing and all the things we hear in these, aspiring ways. I'm like, okay, I'm holding this role as playwright to write this so that you can practice and care for trans identified actors, right? Making sure they have even a restroom at your theater that they could go in, right? How can people humanize themselves? So I'm seeing this trilogy that I'm working on too as a form of community building. Working on some of the other work, I feel like they're also all related because it takes, I think, lifetimes to make that and other people's lifetimes. So it's really the process to joy, it's a long one, but I know that there's hope. And so at the end of the day, when I think about this trilogy, I'm like, no, in world building a speculative queer future, there is hope. And I'm, really leaning on, I'm banking on process for sure. Because I do feel like it's helpful to dialogue about recognize in real time, right? Colonial narratives, but also prioritize people's values and ethics and experiences and be in conversations about right histories of marginalized groups who are and those often impacted by right colonialism, which actually affects everybody, right, essentially, because we all drink water, we all look at the sky, we all love cozy things, we all like our cappuccinos, right, etc., and so on and so forth, right? This idea we are the youngest species of this, the two-legged, the four-legged, the winged, the rooted from earth to sky and back again. We are human. So how are we gathering and collecting together and at this time amplifying some of the themes that are coming from the trilogy? So those are just some things that I'm thinking about. I'm, writing it as both a challenge and seeing who wants to be a collaborator. I think to make work like this, it's creating coalition building, right? And so those are the folks I'm looking for, as well as who I'm writing for. And I have dreams about, you know, like even today, even maybe next week, like a young, like indigiqueer person that couldn't believe that they could even write something, hear something, do something like this, get to know the work and have it influence so that they can do more, do better. And I think in the communities that I'm involved in at this moment, that's super important to be in conversation across borders, right, across land bases and to come together. So I'm seriously writing this as a form of as a form of connecting.
Yeah, the deeper I get into the process, and the deeper I get into the research, the more like empowered I find that I become, right? When I discover something for myself that I never knew, you can't help but have a sense of pride, right? And you can't, and so I think when I'm thinking about answering the questions, I don't know, there's something in there for me about like what is the potential of a cycle, and what is the potential of uncovering something that you never knew about your community, about your people, about where you come from. And you know, I one of the things that I keep thinking about too is like, for instance, in my public school education, like we would learn about Abraham Lincoln freed slaves. We would learn a little bit about the civil rights movement. We'd learn about Rosa Parks and then Obama, and you know, now we're post racism. You know what I mean? But like what I had to discover for myself was, oh, actually at the end of you know, emancipation, we're talking about the Reconstruction era, we had almost 2,000 Black people in elected positions of power. You had a whole movement of folks who were actively making moves to grab power, to hold this country up to what it says it's about, right? And so it's like that really shifts the narrative on that particular time period. So I don't know. I think there's something in this cycle about empowering our folks, going back, learning stuff you never knew, bringing that forward with you. And then I think about who the audience is, and when you're operating within the theater space, and you're trying to reach a particular audience, like my people, I'm like, okay, what are the conversations I want to, first of all, I want to have these stories reflect us. I want to see the full breadth of our humanity on stage. And what are the conversations that we have in our own communities, or that we would like to be having? What are the things that we want to see, the things that make us feel seen, and how do we have those? So I don't know, that it's a lot of rambling, but I think within that is the answer, like the answer to why this cycle, and what it can do. I think it's empowering. I think it's about being seen, and a plethora of other things and similar words.
You've all named that your work is demanding, is a what is it? A demanding in the best possible way invitation for other people to join you, right? To come together, to think about these questions, to see people, to hear these stories, to understand there's no single narrative, and that there's just a far larger inquiry that we need for our collective humanity. And so the theater, I think, is the place for that. I know we only have a few minutes left, and I feel bad to all the people who've dropped questions in the chat. So I'm going to ask one, and then okay. So one of the questions in the chat was sort of like, how do you talk about sharing the cycle in our theater ecosystem? Do you say I'm writing a cycle? Do you talk about the one play? I mean, Mfoniso, you got Boston to do all nine, like how, so that's one question. And then I think like the thing I'd love to end on is sort of, what are your big hopes and dreams? Like, will you keep writing cycles once you finish? What are you on to? Like this is, you are three just incredible writers who are giving your gift of voice to all of us. And I know I'm really grateful for it. And just curious, what else are you thinking about, or what might you do next? And also, how do you pitch your plays or talk about your plays to people? One very business question, and then one more. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
I feel like I tend to talk about each play individually and then somehow bring in the cycle. I think it's just a natural fit, but I think I try to focus on each play individually. And then as far as what I'm interested in after this, I don't know if it's even after this or within it because I'm still constructing the plays, but I'm interested in farce. I'm interested in horror plays. You know, I love horror movies. I love the genre. So more genre pieces. I'm really fascinated by those. I want to see those more of those on stage. I want to see farce. I want to see Black people being able to like be really funny and outrageous and do comedy. That's what I'm interested in.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit here. Let's see. Yeah, in pitching the plays, definitely, coloniality loves the like what wants the one play, the one off, like just one and done kind of play. So what I'm finding is, I just kind of wrote out what each play is, what I think each play might be about, and then kind of really structured it and kind of packaged it in a way, right? And I'm using that term very on purpose, to have folks understand who might not think in a decolonial kind of fluid way that I'm thinking in. So I kind of definitely have to package the play like those little Lunchables that you eat. You got the crackers there, you got the cheese, and then the meat, I don't know, or something like that. So I'm kind of really actually, and it's a study to think about that. The other part that I'll talk about little is about the tone and the style of the piece. So in this Trans World trilogy, there are comedies, and they're using settlerism as a form of subversion, right? So and that includes cis settlerism because it's a whole world about trans identity, non-binary folks. So cis identity is also in there, and so I talk about tone, style, and theme when some folks also ask me about the plays and what I know and what I don't know about them. So that's the one question I'll answer, and I'll bounce back to the rest. I'll pass it on for time's purposes.
For me, I really make sure, because it is continuous, that the plays can stand on its own, on their own. And I try my best to whet the appetite. I know very well that when people see a play by me, there are very few people who have read a full-length play that is outside the cycle. So I do think that when people see my name, they're like, it's a new family play. We're at the point you see a Basiama, you're like, it's a play. Got you. We're in the world. So, but that's also, again, 16 years of doing it, and have been writing pretty continuously in this work. So this is like, for better, for worse, for all that it means to say my life's work. So I don't actually talk about it very much anymore, like preempting people that this is part of a cycle, or figuring out how to say that. In the beginning, I did, and I had to really, really talk about I had how do I say this, making indelible characters that made people want to come back for more, and then subverting their want at the next play is something that I did quite early, and that's how I tackled that. Um, I think, Ty, you were talking a little bit about tone and style, and I want to actually just tap that a little bit, because that is important for me inside the cycle, that there's no play that has the same tone, that has the same style, but it is, the cycle itself is anchored and is cohered by, is it true? And is it loving no matter how difficult it is? And in my plays, they say awful things to each other from places, though, of seeking a loving connection. It's so, and I do think that that's how maybe the cycle will cohere, and it's me, even though one play is in verse and another play barely has any words in it, like in Old Age. And as for what comes next, I'm gonna sleep. With such joy, I am going to hug my partner and go to ground for as long as I need to go to ground until another thing sparks. I have no intention on another cycle, but if you know me, I would not, grain of salt that, because who the hell knows what's going to happen. What we do know is that in 2026, when the last play goes up, you will not find me. From a place of joy, I will be somewhere else, not with a pen, a paper, or a computer. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. Okay.
Thank you for that. Thank you all. Oh, my friends, what I could spend all evening talking to you and hearing about your work. I'm so honored that you chose to make this time tonight. I cannot wait to continue to see all of your work on stage. I'm going to wrap this up. I wanted to also just sort of name other people who write in cycles. Lucy Thurber, Say Muktavanse, Tim J. Lord, Dominique Morisseau, Danielle Love, that there are so many writers, and I know I have missed other people. And by all means, I hope that everyone listening and everyone here will help us all bear beautiful fruit with the work that we want to do as artists. So thank you so much. I also I would be remiss if I did not say, for those of you, we are about to do our last public reading of the season at Playwrights Center, J.C. Pancrat's Mortals, happening May 12th and 13th, I think. Oh, shame on me. Oh yes, Katori Hall, thank you for dropping that in, Andrew. So you can find out more information about our last reading at our website. And then finally, if you can, for over 53 years, Playwright Center has been a place of generative and transformative creativity. What we do here impacts artists and audiences around the country, and this is only possible because of the philanthropic support we receive. So if you can, I hope you will consider making a donation to support our work as we move forward. We are all in uncharted waters right now. And I thank the artists for being our guides, for speaking truth to power, for asking us questions that demand our thoughtfulness and our love and our spirit, even if they don't have answers. So Ty, Andrew, and Mfoniso, thank you so much for this conversation tonight. I'm so grateful to you and your artistry. And thank you all out there, and we hope to see you soon.